The Miami Dolphins are not done with their talent collection ahead of the 2024 NFL season, but it is now a good time to stop after the draft and look at this roster in comparison to last year's. Where are the Dolphins better? That is our subject here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack. You can find our shows here on the Locked On Network on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, with the tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the show. We are looking at the Dolphins roster today through a lens that is very comparative in nature. Where are the Dolphins better than last season? And we're going to go position room by position room, because I think that's the most easily digestible way to kind of talk about where the changes have happened, where the changes have not happened, where the changes still need to happen. We've looked at safety and interior offensive line. And I'll give you a spoiler. I think those are two spots in particular. The Dolphins are not better than they were last year yet. The good news is they can still, I think, get there with at least one of those two spots. And there's some complicating factors with the way that one of the other position rooms worked itself out this past year that I think it's very easily attainable for the full body of work to be better than what it was, even if the talent assembly is not as good. And of course, that breaks both ways and is applicable across the board for the entirety of the roster, but we'll tackle that as we get there. We're going to start with the skill players, and it's an easy one at the quarterback position. It's the same three presumed names that are presences in the locker room. If you had to ask me right now, I think Miami carries two on the active roster in Tonga Valoa and Mike White, and then they have Skylar Thompson on the practice squad, who could be the emergency elevation third quarterback each and every week. And if you had to ask me right now, that's a push. It's not better. It's not worse. It's the exact same. I think the difference this year is Miami will roster two versus rostering three because of how the dynamics of an emergency third quarterback have changed with the rules and roster management this offseason. So that makes that a pretty open and shut conversation. Now, running back, Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, Alec Ingold, Jeff Wilson. These guys are some of the leaders in the clubhouse to be back. But then a fourth-round draft selection in Jalen Wright as another really good scheme fit with a very stylistic, comparable skill set to what the Dolphins have historically loved, but with a little bit more size and mass behind it. I have a hard time saying that this is not a better position room than what it was last year when it was Mostert, Achane, Jeff Wilson, Savon Ahmed got some run, Chris Brooks got a little bit of looks. The Dolphins will have some promising young players, most notably Chris Brooks, in my mind, that may get pushed off of this 53 just based off of the numbers game. But Jalen Wright, with the explosiveness that he has, that's a totally different ballgame than what Chris Brooks and even, for my money, Jeff Wilson brings to the table. So these McDaniel, Shanahan rushing offenses have historically been at their best when they have three guys to rotate in the backfield. And I think Miami tangibly has a trio right now that you're not compromising the explosiveness element that you want as the identity of the backfield. And I think that's the big difference from last year to this year. So I would say put it on the board. Running back, you are better than what you were last year. Wide receiver, the obvious addition of Odell Beckham Jr., pushing everybody else down a spot. I think getting Eric Ezukanma back healthy helps as well. These snaps were going to Cedric Wilson and Robbie Chosen and Braxton Berrios and River Craycraft when he was healthy. And I think there's going to be some bubble names here too that were names that were on the roster last year. That, by extension, means it's a better room. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Odell Beckham is definitively better than any trio the Dolphins ran out at wide receiver last year. And then, oh, by the way, you have some promising young rookies that can maybe get themselves into the mix. I would still lean Malik Washington be the one, if you had to ask me who to pick, would make the 53 to start. But Taj Washington, does he latch onto the practice squad? I think that's a reasonable question, but that doesn't help answer the question of, is the 53 wide receiver room better? And I wouldn't be surprised if they're not done there either. It seems like there's a little bit more investment this year in, we want to make sure our 21/12 personnel group has more strength while simultaneously wanting our 11 personnel group to have more strength, so that depending on what we have to do on a week-to-week basis for how we want to build our game planning, we have more answers. So would not be surprised if there's more to come in that regard as well at wide receiver. Now, the tight end room, Jonnu Smith versus Durham Smythe and Julian Hill is already the best player in the room for my money. So I think that's another easy answer. 3 of the 4 rooms that we cover with the skill group are better. I think Odell's your 3rd best wide receiver. I think Jonnu's your best tight end. And I think Jalen Wright's your 3rd best running back, at least to start. And we'll see how things shake out from there. But yeah, I think Jonnu Smith being a missing element from tight end sets for getting the ball in his hands, somebody you have to respect from a ball in his hands, run after catch threat, versus Durham Smythe, who was so frequently an afterthought, and teams at times didn't even bother to cover him. And when they did, okay, you make the tackle and end of play and you go to the next play. So I know nobody really had questions about the skill groups because of how productive these skill groups were last year from a rushing and receiving standpoint. But I do think those rooms around the quarterback position, which has no changes, is a better overall collection and assembly of talent in every single room. That's a nice place to be. I think we're going to go to the offensive line next, and we'll go do offensive tackles and then interior and talk about the dynamics there. And then we'll go to the defensive line and do the same thing. And I think that's where this conversation gets a little more murky and complicated. But also with context, you can see some pathways for improved total body of work. And we're going to come that way next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one single place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to trend your entire portfolio with confidence. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. You could securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and that's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination. That is yahoofinance.com, yahoofinance.com. Passion, drive, and patience are not just the keys to winning championships. It's the keys to you keeping your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you're always finding exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. So let's go to the offensive line, where, if we've said it once, we've said it 100 times. And I know everybody's perception is the Dolphins have not done enough along the offensive line this offseason relative to what the issues were that helped end their season. And I agree with that. Okay. Look at me. I agree with that. But you're going to have a hard time convincing me the tackle room's not better than it was last year. Because your tackle 4 last year was Keon Smith, who was a promising, good mover. But now you have the deluxe version of that in Patrick Paul as the potential heir to Teron Armstead at the other tackle spot. Austin Jackson has made the leap that we thought he was physically capable of, but had resided that it wasn't going to happen. So I think, especially in comparison to where we were 12 months ago, the perception of the tackle room is exponentially better. You still had your concerns about Teron Armstead and his health and availability. There was no enthusiasm about Austin Jackson whatsoever. Keon Smith was an afterthought who was a practice squad guy. And Kendall Lamb was like, yeah, he looked good for a half against New England, and that was it, and he got hurt. You have all that with answers questioned. Answers questioned. Jeez Louise. Let me take a little Gatorade here. I need some electrolytes for my brain. Questions answered. Yikes. Plus a second-round draft choice. And you have seen what this offensive line coach and this system has been able to pull from players as they get more time on task. The tackle room is better than it was last year. I don't think you can argue that. There's more depth. I think you have 5 53-man roster caliber players, and you have 2 definitive, adequate level starters or better in Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson. I think Kendall Lamb, his film last year was adequate starter tape, even though he was the swing tackle, and he got a lot of run. And now you have Patrick Paul on top of a toolsy Keon Smith. 2 really toolsy athletic players. And again, the offensive ideology is everything looks the same until it's not. And that plays into guys that have tools and length and size and athleticism to be right even when they're wrong at times. And that was one of the main theses of the selection of Patrick Paul that they talked about, is that he blocks a lot of guys with the technique being all over the place. Imagine what it could look like if he gets that together. The interior offensive line is not better than it was last year, and it's not close. So that's the bad news. So we trended same, running backs better, wide receivers better, tight ends better, tackles better, interior offensive line. I think it's the only spot that you're worse than what you were last year. And even if you go out and you sign Greg Van Roten and you sign a player that I'm not particularly interested in, Dalton Risner, even if you sign them both, you're still not better than what you were last year. Because I do think Aaron Brewer is a step down from Connor Williams until he proves otherwise. I do think he's an outstanding scheme fit. I think he'd be an adequate level starter in this scheme. I think you could really see his athleticism pop. I see the vision there. I'm buying the vision. But Connor Williams was one of the best centers in football when he was healthy in the system the last 2 years. Your concerns about snaps be damned. I'm not interested in hearing it. Guard Robert Hunt is gone, and he has not been replaced. Isaiah Wynn's back. Liam Eichenberg's back. You brought in Jack Driscoll, presumably to be the player who you thought Dan Feeney could be last year. So there's a lot of parallels and just a vacant void that has not been filled. That's not great. It's not great, if we're being honest. But you also had Robert Hunt only played 500 snaps last year, 450 snaps last year. Connor Williams only played 450 snaps last year. Isaiah Wynn played 300 snaps last year. And that for me is where I can reconcile being collectively worse from a talent perspective if you get more snaps from the group that's supposed to be your core group. Because whoever your trio is that you run out here this year at the beginning of the season, it's not going to be as good as Isaiah Wynn, Connor Williams, Robert Hunt last year on the interior. But the Dolphins had that trio for what? 1 game? 2 games? Before it was interrupted in its entirety? Can we get we just did over on Locked On NFL Scouting, we just did the quarterback situation for the Denver Broncos. They had 4 offensive linemen play over 1,030 snaps, and Mike McGlinchey was the 5th, and he played 960. Are you kidding me? Miami had 1 guy over 900 snaps. It was Austin Jackson. So I think even if you add Greg Van Roten, who I think could be the best available talent, and we did that show earlier this week, even if you add him, the collective sum, I would have Isaiah Wynn, Aaron Brewer, and Greg Van Roten all as adequate level starters as interior players. That can be good enough if they play. What good does having a cornerstone player in Connor Williams and a quality starter in Robert Hunt and an adequate level starter in Isaiah Wynn do? What good does all of that talent collection do for you if nobody plays more than half the snaps? So that's the big thing for me. There's a pathway to Miami being worse from a talent perspective and better on the interior, and it's having the guys that are supposed to play. And if you told me that 2 out of those 3 guys, like Miami got the previous year with both Connor Williams and Robert Hunt, if both of those guys play all season long like they did the previous year and Miami gets that back, I think the interior offensive line will be a better group, even if the talent is worse. Over on the defensive side of the ball, you can't necessarily say the same thing. You're already setting yourself up for guys to miss some time. It's Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Shaq Barrett, a couple of rookies, Chop Robinson, Muhammad Kamara. Depending on Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips' health and availability, you probably need another vet no matter what. It's not going to be as good of a group if those guys miss the time early in the season. And even coming back from the injury, like Jalen Phillips, 9 months removed from an Achilles tear, is probably not going to be the Jalen Phillips you're accustomed to seeing. Now, I think that there's plenty of potential for him to still make a lot of plays. He's still very young. His recovery should be promising. He seems to be trending very well. Chop Robinson, explosiveness off the edge, that presence exists on some long and late passing downs. I could see him being a notable threat for you while he figures out some of the early down stuff. I think it's a deeper group, but I think the injuries that you're carrying into the season, I would probably say it's marginally diminished versus last year's group for me. Shaq Barrett is a saving grace here versus Andrew Van Ginkel. I think Barrett's a more accomplished player. I think he's a little bit more of a physical player than what Andrew Van Ginkel is. I think Andrew Van Ginkel is certainly much more explosive. He's more bendy off the edge. But I would take Shaq Barrett's pass rush resume in its entirety. I just don't think he's as versatile as what Andrew Van Ginkel is. And he's not as dynamic as Andrew Van Ginkel. So I would say that's a moderate downgrade at edge. Can you find another vet somewhere to help close the gap, at least until October? And hopefully everybody's back and they get some snaps under their belts. And by the end of the season, this could maybe be a better group than it was last year. I think it has the potential to be if everybody stays healthy through the end of the season. But how long do you have to wait till everybody's back? And how long does it take for them to get snaps under the belt? I can't sit here with a straight face and tell you it's a better group than last year because of the injuries coming in. And then same perception as the Robert Hunt thing on the offensive side of the ball. Christian Wilkins has not been replaced. I think there's a lot of depth and potential talent for rotational roles. They're going to play a very different, Miami had 13 guys last year. It was their base group, their nickel corner, and their third pass rusher, right? It was the base defense, and then Kader Kohu / Eli Apple, and it was Andrew Van Ginkel as the third pass rush guy. And those guys were the guys that played. And anybody else didn't play more than 5 snaps because Vic Fangio didn't trust you, right? Oh, new numbers just dropped. Let's go. All right, breaking news. Interrupt. Dolphins just dropped new numbers. Let's see what we got. I love breaking news on the show. Odell Beckham wearing number 3. Jonnu Smith wearing number 9. That's going to be fire. Jordan Brooks wearing 20. Jalen Wright wearing 25. We kind of heard that ahead of time. Chop Robinson 44, which moves Blake Ferguson to 48. Patrick Paul wearing 52. Aaron Brewer wearing 55. He's going to confirm good player wearing 55. Shaq Barrett 58. Tier Tart 94. He's taking Christian Wilkins' number. Oh, Jody Fortson with the all aesthetic tight end wearing number 88. Okay. There's your breaking news, new numbers reaction live on the show. They're ideologically going to be very different in the interior defensive line. And I think if they still had Christian Wilkins, they would probably play more in line with keeping all of that talent on the field. They obviously are going to moneyball this thing a little bit between Harris and Gallimore and Tart and Jones and the whole conglomerate of interior defensive line. But I can't sit here with a straight face and say it's a better and more talented group. You're not better here with the subtraction of Christian Wilkins and replacing him with Tier Tart, Benito Jones, Jonathan Harris, Neville Gallimore. Now, I think you can reverse engineer 70% of it. And what you do on passing downs, instead of tasking Christian Wilkins with rushing the passer, you could see Chop and Jalen and Chubb and Barrett and those guys kind of all getting on the field simultaneously. And then Jordan Brooks is pretty darn good rushing from depth as well. So I think there's just some different things that they'll do on obvious passing downs instead of saying, like Vic, that defense was, here's your front four, and we're going to rush. And if we want to blitz you, we'll blitz you. If we want to sim blitz you, we'll sim pressure you and drop guys out. But at the end of the day, like we're most of the time going to rush four. We're going to be kind of blitz averse through some of the majority of the season. I think this will be a more aggressive group, and that's how they'll look to compensate and speed up the timing for the quarterbacks. But it's not a better group. So now you were started hot with 4 straight position groups that you say, yeah, we're better than when we were last year. And now the other side of that coin is now 3 consecutive groups between the interior offensive line, the edge group, and the interior defensive line, where I don't think you're better than what you were last year, but I can still see the pathway to the entire sum being better depending on what the availability is for the interior offensive line and what the availability is for your premier guys in the edge group. But it's a question, one that we won't have answered until the season starts. Now we have the back 7 coming your way next year on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Are the Dolphins better than last year? That is next, so make sure you stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we need the opportunity to get things off of our chest. Big or small, certain things in life can really start to weigh on you. It's important to let those things out, especially to somebody who is unbiased in your life. Therapy can be a different experience for everyone. And while most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team and whether they're better than they were last year in the interior defensive line group, it's still important for you to get those things off of your chest before they weigh on you too much. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. You can visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon. You get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Linebackers, yes. You're better here than you were last year. You're deeper here. You're more experienced here. I think you're better in coverage here. You've got more special teams upside here. If you had to ask me, you might get 6 guys on the 53 between Brooks and Long, your perceived starters. You've got a couple of perceived special teams guys in Duke Riley and Cam Brown with the new special teams and kickoff rules. I could see that being an important piece of the puzzle. Anthony Walker's a really experienced player, a really good player as far as like having some physicality in tight spaces. And then you have Channing Tindall. If you are indeed going to be more of a second level and blitz heavy group, that's where Tindall shined at Georgia. So I could see this potentially having a specific role for some sub packages that brings out something we haven't seen from Channing Tindall. Plus, is he the Austin Jackson of this year's roster? I wouldn't dismiss it entirely. Now, I think if it doesn't happen now, you're probably not going to feel good about it happening ever. But that he goes from being your 4th linebacker to being your 6th linebacker if he doesn't take a step forward. And I think that versus Jerome Baker, who I think got a little bit of a bum rap in Miami for all the responsibilities that he was given. And I'm glad he got his shine in Hard Knocks. And a lot of Dolphins fans, it seemed like after Hard Knocks came to really appreciate Jerome Baker. Jordan Brooks is a better coverage player, though. He's a bigger player. He's a more physical player. I think the read consistency with Jerome's a more experienced player, and I think that shows. But I think the trade-off there is enough where I feel like it's an upgrade for you, even if they're 2 players that I have bucketed as like the same caliber of talent. If I think about what we think this defense is going to be, Jerome Baker and all of his pass rush success walked up on the edge in all these cover 0 and double mug and 5-0 or Navajo front looks is what the Shanahan offense identifies the kinds of fronts that Brian Flores and Josh Boyer like to put out there. This is a different application of pressure. And I think Jordan Brooks is a better fit for that kind of pressure. Plus, he's better in coverage. And then you have more depth. And then you have somebody to push Duke Riley from a special teams perspective. You've got another experienced starting player in Walker in the mix here. You just have so much more. It's a better group. I don't know that you're better at corner, but you're certainly more versatile at corner. And again, if you're applying it through the lens of what we anticipate this scheme is going to look like, that probably counts. It probably counts as better. Well, Jalen Ramsey will move around more. It will maximize him more. That's better. Kendall Fuller has more interchangeability to play inside and outside. That gives you more schematic and matchup flexibility than what Xavier Howard did. He's not a better player than Xavier Howard, but he's more versatile. Cam Smith with another year in the system, I think you will get good returns on Cam Smith this year. If you went nickel, it would not surprise me if Cam Smith came in and he played outside and Jalen Ramsey played in the nickel a lot. If you're really intent on moving Jalen Ramsey around, I think Cam Smith is in line for a big role. And then Nik Needham, another year removed, plus Kader Kohu. If there is parallel with from a coverage perspective, what they did last year to what they do this year, as Anthony Weaver kind of alluded to, is another year of that helpful for Kader Kohu, who really struggled with a lot of the zone and zone match principles as compared to being like a very heavy man coverage nickel corner his rookie season. I think you're better here. If you wanted to call it a push, I wouldn't argue with you. If you wanted to say the Dolphins are worse here because Xavier Howard's not here, I'm not buying that bread. Sorry, I'm not. And then at safety, I don't think you're better yet, but I think it is very easily attainable for you to be a better group. There's about 6 names you could sign off the street right now, and I would say, yep, safety room's better than what it was last year. Jordan Poyer, Saran Neal, again, from a special teams perspective, it's a monumental upgrade. Saran Neal's an outstanding special teams player, and I know a lot of people don't care about that, but special teams played a firsthand contribution to the Dolphins losing in Week 18 last year, and it cost them a home playoff game. Now, again, some of that is, your guy went down and tore his patellar tendon or whatever it was, like in the hole on the punt return. But that context, like it's special teams, right? So I think that's very close to being a better group. It's not a better group yet. I think you look at what the Dolphins have, the interior offensive line, you're not better in. Interior defensive line, offense and defense, you're not better. I see a pathway for you being better on the offensive side, even while having less talent. The edge group, I'd say you're not better in, but that's injuries coming into the season. I think you're a deeper group than what they were last year. And if the guys come back and they are healthy at the top of the depth chart, by the end of the season, I would say that is a better group. And the safety group, you're not better in, but that's a very easily attainable acquisition away from being better than what you were last year. And everything else, I think you are better at, unless you stayed the same. Is it a better roster? To be determined. We'll see what they do still. And we should know in the next 4 weeks what else is to come. And we will react to that as it happens. And I hope you come back and check out all of those reactions as that news comes your way. I'm Kyle Krabs, and you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. We don't just say it. I appreciate you guys for checking out the show. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Fins up. Enjoy your weekend, and I will be back again soon for more talk on the Miami Dolphins.